In this edition of Generations, we talk to Jeff Weiss and Peter Boyce of Age of Majority about how companies and marketers are missing out on billions of dollars from the older generation. Greg McKenna of the Higganum Pharmacy and one of SeniorCenterCT.org's advertisers talks about a new robotic machine he's invested in to give his customers a faster and better service. And Judy Jenks from SeniorCenterCT.org joins us to discuss creating a disaster plan during hurricane season. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith and welcome to Generations, a new podcast for people of your generation. Companies are advertising to us everywhere, from roadside billboards to magazines, TV, radio, and online. But if you look closely at the adverts, you'll see many of them are targeting a younger audience. The reality is, however, that baby boomers and the older generation in the US now make up the majority when it comes to those with disposable income. So to find out more about this, I spoke to Jeff Weiss, President and CEO, and Peter Boyce, Head of Research and Content from the agency Age of Majority, to find out more about this shifting landscape and what they are terming active aging. So joining me now is Jeff and Peter from Age of Majority. Guys, thanks for joining us on Generations.
It's great to be with you today, Brian. Thank you,
Brian.
Tell us, what is active aging?
Well, I'll start off. As we were thinking about age majority and thinking about the older population group, we realized that we now have a group of people, of consumers, that is large and a group that we've never seen before. And society and marketers and businesses really don't know what to make of them or what even to call them. So we started delving into it further. We did some research that Peter can talk about in a moment, but we realized that there's a large portion of the over 55 population who is still very vibrant. They're active physically, mentally, and socially. And when you look at some of the terms being used that have been used, boomers and seniors, which are actually becoming off-putting for a lot of these older consumers, we thought the best term for this group would be active agers. So active aging consumers are those people who are still quite active at different levels, mind you, both physically, mentally, and socially.
Just to add to that, it was our belief that this group of active agers actually was, a much larger part of what the quote-unquote senior population that people would have thought, and really that stereotypical view of the quote-unquote senior really was a smaller part of it. So we did some really interesting work with the Rotman School of Business, which really around breaking out the segments and really getting a handle on what this group was all about. And this research actually suggested that 75% of the 55 plus population actually make up active agers. And it was really only about a quarter of that 55 plus population are really that stereotypical view of seniors. So what was even more interesting about that was they're not all the same either. So there actually are two groups that we identify within this active aging audience. One we call the wellness seeker, and they really put a priority on personal well-being and fulfillment and things that really make them feel good. The other group we call explorers, and they actually, from a marketer's perspective, very interesting because they're the highest spending of the active aging audience. And they're really all about exploration, accomplishments, and entertainment. So, you probably find them at some of those music concerts that are going on for older audiences right now.
So tell us about this age shift that's happened over the years and where we are now, because you say that we're at a sort of a pivotal point where the older generation is now really the majority, or is certainly going to be growing into the majority.
It's interesting when you look at life expectancy over the last decades and centuries. If you look from the year 1000 AD up to about 1900, it was fairly flat. Life expectancy was about 25 years old around the world. In 1900, life expectancy globally was only 31. In the US, a much more developed country, was 47. So 118 years ago, life expectancy was 47. Now, or just 120 or so years later, life expectancy is about 78 or 79 years in North America. So that's a 30-year increase in life expectancy over just over a 100-year span. So pretty incredible. And it's estimated that by the year 2050, life expectancy will be at about 88. So it just continues to grow as people live longer, live healthier, with technologies and new new medicines and other things that help us live longer. So, if you think about 30 extra years of life on average for people, that equates to more than 250,000 hours of extra time that we have in our lives. So the big question is for businesses and marketers primarily, but for individuals, is how are you going to spend your time? What are you going to spend your money on as you live these extra years?
Let's talk about this thing that you call the dirty dozen myths, which you aim fairly and squarely at marketers who are failing to understand or even to market to the active aging population. Just talk us through a couple of maybe some of the higher level ones.
One foot in the grave, and it's that idea that getting old is really depressing. There just isn't that much to live for anymore. And it's really interesting that surveys have actually found that people are the happiest between the ages of 75 and 79. And it's kind of not surprising. You have more time in that part of your life. You've accomplished a lot. A lot of responsibilities are kind of gone. You've got that time to kind of refocus on yourself. So active agers are really doing those things that they really love to do. And it really plays out a number of different areas. You think about I mentioned sort of concerts before. Well, one of the things that is really interesting, that the number of live events being attended by quote unquote boomers over the last 10 years has really gone up a lot. They're really out there, enjoying these things that allow them to explore their sense of fulfillment. So one example is a couple of years ago, we saw things like Desert Trip was a large music concert that happened. It was really dubbed Oldchella because for the headliners, there were people like Paul McCartney, Bob Dylan, Neil Young, the Rolling Stones, and they're really catering to this, this sense of fun and living life to the fullest that this active aging audience is all about.
Another myth that's probably the one most pronounced stereotype that bugs active agers the most, we call "what's a Bluetooth?" And as it suggests, it's the idea that active agers are technologically averse and challenged, and that just isn't true. And this applies both to kind of the services and apps and tools that are out there, but also the devices that are out there. And we know that although active agers might not be the early adopters when it comes to new services or devices, but once these things are launched, the growth rates come highly or largely from older consumers. And if you look at the growth in terms of smartphones, and the one in terms of adoption now that's happening the most, driven by technology, is the whole area of smart speakers. And just looking, it's estimated this year there'll be over 100 million smart speakers around the world, and that's going to go to 250 million in about 2 or 3 years. And the applications for that for active aging consumers are immense and incredible, and we're seeing that picked up a lot, and penetration growing significantly with that group.
And another myth that we thought was really interesting, because from a marketing perspective specifically, is one we call tried and true. And it's that idea that older adults still rely heavily on traditional media, the 6 o'clock news to get all their forms of advertising. They're using TV to sort of, largely in their purchase decisions. And it's really interesting. And this whole thing is upended by the fact that, yes, well, active agers are more likely to use traditional media or traditional advertising is actually less effective on active aging than it is on millennials. It's probably very surprising for many marketers out there. So, we've actually found that the better use for things like television, for instance, are helping get active agers to search for your products online, because we know they're heavy users of online search. They really want to be empowered with information. They're very savvy. They've been through this whole lifetime of actually evaluating ads, and they're ready to sort of make their own choices and empower themselves to do so.
Let me put this final question to both of you. How big a market is this by way of, dollars?
So in terms of the size of the market, active aging consumers, the over 55, and as we said before, the majority of active aging consumers control about 70% of the wealth in the world. So that's huge. And then when you look at annual consumer spending, depending on the category, it's generally between 40 to 50% of all consumer spending is made by these older consumers. And where the big business opportunity is when you look at how much of the marketing and business budgets are spent against this group that is spending the majority of money in many cases. Only 5 to 10% of marketing dollars target active aging consumers. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. One of the big ones being that when you look at the marketing departments of many companies, the number we've heard is that only 6% of marketers are over 40. So you've got younger consumers who still have a lot of the stereotypes of older consumers who are marketing to them thinking, oh, I have no desire to market to my grandparents. That's not who I really want to go after. So they really want to do things that are more focused on younger consumers, missing the big opportunities.
Jeff Weiss and Peter Boyce of Age of Majority. It's been absolutely fascinating. Let's hope that this research resonates with the marketers. Thank you ever so much for joining us on Generations.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
Our pleasure.
A fascinating discussion there, and it will be interesting to see how advertising continues to change over the next few years to acknowledge the active ager. Now, do you take prescription pills and tablets on a daily basis? If you do, then you're just one of many older Americans who do, and in some cases, you might even be taking several medications every day. It's easy to forget them, and that in itself can have potential health risks. We visited Greg McKenna of Higganum Pharmacy in the town of Higganum here in Connecticut to see his new high-tech robotic system he's installed to help his customers take their daily medications exactly as the doctor intended. And for full disclosure, we should add that Higganum Pharmacy is an advertiser on the Senior Centre CT.org website. So, Greg, we're stood in front of the SynMed machine, or the robot as you affectionately refer to it as. So just talk us through. This is a very large machine, glass-fronted. It looks like some sort of little conveyor belt system in there, which obviously discharges the tablets. So we've got some what looks like pieces of paper in there. What exactly are these pieces of paper?
Okay. So these pieces of paper, really what these are, organized cards that are able to take your medication and divide your medication up into 4 different times during the day per card. Or if you wanted to take your medication 6 times a day, we'd actually end up using 2 cards, and we'd just redefine the times on the heading of the card. But the cards have these little plastic cups in them. And in front of you, as you said, you see all these medications. So there's 400 different medications. Each drug is now being picked by a particular pipette. That you see that robot arm, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 14 different pipettes. So it can pill 14 different drugs at one time. So we talked about the fact that, a person would be able to do about 6 patients an hour, whereas this machine can do 50 patients an hour. So it's really kind of huge. So when you now take the person that, like I said, the person that had 14 different meds, we got it down to 12, and those 12 meds got separated into 3 different times during the day that they're taking the meds. So it coordinated all the meds. And now and I think that person I was telling you about previously, we actually changed some meds that should have been taken in the evening. They were taking in the morning. We moved them to the evening. Person was sleeping better. It's amazing. I don't take that med during the day where I'm making where I get drowsy. Now let's use it at night where I want to stay drowsy and stay asleep, right? So, again, why you're taking, what you're taking, how you're taking is so important. And the machine is able to now grab 14 different meds at a time, and it actually moves down each row and just grabs. The pipette actually moves into the canister, takes the medication, airlifts it out, and drops it right into the cassette that it's supposed to be.
So we're looking, as I say, at these pieces of card. I believe they form what are called blister packs ultimately.
Blister packs, that's correct. Yep, there we go. Okay.
And so then once obviously the machine has filled these various cards which are loaded into it, I see there's a young lady working to the right here. There's a printer underneath her desk, but she's also got a very similar setup on top, which have got looks like templates for the blister pack. So what's the job here? What does she actually do here?
Okay, so that whole coordination. So you're taking those cards. So you had actually 12 blister packs. So we're filling 12 different people now. And you're moving those 12 people and you're bringing it over to the side now. Here's the quality assurance labeling side. So in fact, if you remember what I was showing you previously, the back of the card had the label of how many drugs in that particular blister. She's putting the label on, and the labels are printed out so that they automatically go right across the top, so that what is being packed by the robot is now being labeled by the technician here. And the technician is doing the quality control check, so she's looked at it previously to say, okay, do I have eight separate medications in here, or 12, or however it is. Each one of these cups can actually hold up to 23 different meds.
So then once obviously the quality check has been undertaken, so, and you're satisfied that everything is okay, then these blister packs are either ready for people to pick up or to be delivered?
Okay, so after the technician actually labels it, it actually gets set over for a pharmacist to actually double check. Then all 4 packages, because you would get 4 blister packs, each one good for a week. Okay, so you get 4 per month. We put it together with a very handy medication management sheet that you can take to each doctor. So you can come into your doctor's visit. They say, "What are you taking?" And you can hand them a copy of everything you're taking, the time you're taking, etc. And it can be used, put on your refrigerator if, God forbid, you had to have an ambulance come through. You just pull the medication sheet, and they get that every single month. And it's really a helpful tool because it really provides that communication to everyone in a very simple and easy format. In fact, we put it into a very nice clear plastic bag, all set up, and delivered right to your home by our staff, our friendly drivers.
And if you want to find out more about AccuFill and how it could help you, then call the Higganum Pharmacy on 860-345-3607. And finally, Judy Jenks is with us as ever. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
So today we're talking about making a disaster plan, and we're in the hurricane season.
Yes, we are. One of the things I found out when I took a look at hurricane season this year is what they had predicted, they have changed. We're going to have less hurricanes, and it's because the water coming from Africa is cooler.
Well, that's always good.
Oh, it is always good, because it was like we're not hearing anything, but they're coming, I'm sure. We need to be prepared. We need to make a plan, and when we start making our plan, we need to make sure that we have canned goods, bottled water, pet food, a can opener that's not electric. Sometimes we don't even think about that till we have no power, and it's like, how am I going to get this can open? And then the gas grill. Does a gas grill have propane? You can cook with it. You can heat water. You can do lots of things. And so that should be what we're thinking about now, because we're not even talking about hurricanes, but it's easy to gather those things now. Another thing is a radio. Your flashlights. Do you have batteries? How many batteries do you have? So now's a good time to be looking around and gathering those. One of the things that happened not too long ago when we had a hurricane and we had no power in this area is people couldn't charge their cell phones. They forgot they could use their car. So if you have a car charger, you can just go out to your car, charge your cell phone when you don't have any power. Make sure your gas tanks are full. Make sure you have cash. You know, we've become dependent on those little plastic cards. If we don't have electricity, can you use your little plastic card? You might need to have some cash, so now's a good time to get some of that. So make your plan. Make sure you're informed. Pay attention. You don't need to become a drama queen about the weather, but you do need to be informed. Just sort of listen. Oh, one's coming. How far away is it? Decide when it's time to leave. You know, we see a lot of disasters in other parts of the country, and people stay. We sit here and say, oh, if there was a forest fire coming, I would have left a long time ago. Those people that have forest fires probably say the same thing about us with hurricanes. When are you going to leave? Make a real decision. Are you going to leave when the winds are at a certain point? Are you going to look around and say, is this safe to be here? I'll leave when they tell me to. But just know in advance, be prepared, know when to leave. As you get prepared, as the storm is coming, make sure you go out in the yard and you clean up everything. Put away the lawn furniture, kids' toys, anything that's out there that's going to blow around. Maybe break your own window. You don't want that to happen, so make sure you put it away. And again, make sure you have gas in all your vehicles. Fill the tanks. If you have 3 cars and you're only going to use one, well, you might want to fill all of them, because if there is no power, you can't get gas.
Makes sense.
The other thing that we might forget to do is fill your prescriptions. So a storm might be coming. It even could be a snowstorm. All of this could apply to a snowstorm. Do you have a prescription that maybe you only have a week's worth of pills left? Maybe you need to go to the drugstore, because if the drugstore doesn't have power, how do you get your prescriptions? And that did happen with a major hurricane in this area, and it became a real problem because people couldn't get their medications. Baby wipes. I'm a great aunt right now, and the mother is using baby wipes like crazy, and I realized when it comes to getting prepared for a storm and no electricity, baby wipes would be a wonderful thing for all of us to have. You can wash your hands, you can do a lot of things with baby wipes.
Especially if you've got well water.
Oh, yes.
Because if you don't have a backup generator, and of course the electricity goes, you can't get water.
Right.
So that's a very good point, because at least you can keep yourself clean, or you can clean up messes, etc.
Right.
Because without any water, just for general, because you don't want to waste drinking water necessarily on that sort of thing. So baby wipes, good idea.
Yeah. And when it comes to water, I have well water. I feel as though you should have bottled water, and then you should have gallons of water that you can just, a bathtub. If you have a bathtub, fill it up. You can use that to flush the toilet. So I think you need two sources of water. One for cleaning up or whatever, and then one that you can cook with and you can drink. Pets. If you're going to leave your home, what do you do with your pet? Years ago, before Hurricane Katrina, I didn't think anything. If we needed to leave the dogs with food and water, they'll be fine. I'll be back in a day. When Hurricane Katrina went through, then I realized you might never go back to where you came from. So do you want to leave your pet? If you're taking your pet with you, do you have a crate that the pet can be in? Make sure you have food. Some shelters, you need to have medical records for the dog, that the dog's had a rabies shot and is current on their shots. Find that now. Don't wait until a hurricane comes and say, oh my God, I can't find it. Then you're denied going into a shelter maybe.
And the other thing as well, because you've mentioned it already for us, what if your dog's on medications? I've got a dog and a cat, and they're both on medications. So again, the same thing that you said, the veterinary surgeons could be closed down because of no electricity. And again, what if your dog has to take daily meds? Make sure, suppose the prescription for that is you've got enough of those, because otherwise you don't want your dog getting ill. And
the dog needs food and water. The dog I have right now drinks a huge amount of water, so that dog probably needs more water than I need. But they need their regular food. If you're in a storm situation, you're in a shelter and you change the dog's food, we all know what can happen then. It can be really a nasty job to clean up after.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so make sure you have enough of that. It wouldn't be a bad idea to just have an extra bag of dog food at home right now. If something happens, you can always grab it. And one of the things you want to do is you put together all of your stuff, make sure you have it in something that's waterproof. Nothing would be worse than to get to wherever it is you need to end up. The dog food's all wet. Your clothes are all wet.
Great advice, Judy. Thank you as always. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
A pleasure talking with you always as well.
We'll catch you again next time. So that's it from this edition of Generations. Don't forget to visit seniorcenterct.org to find out what's going on in your neck of the woods. And if you want to send us a topic to talk about or want to be our guest on the podcast, drop us a line by visiting the seniorcenterct.org website. Go to the bottom of the homepage and click the How to Advertise with Us link to get in touch. From myself, Brian Scott Smith, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.